Um, this is a little bit different in that I've asked a special guest to get on, not because it really came from the book as much as I just think it's really important. So Edward is somebody who is a friend of mine and Kevin's, and he's in our men's group, and he's also a attorney. And Edward recently helped me with some family planning stuff regarding living revocable trusts and wills, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys at least knew the basics of it. So I am going to let Edward start out and just explain what it is that he did for maybe for me and what the difference is between a will and a living revocable trust, and then allow us an opportunity to ask him questions. So, Edward, go ahead and jump in and just help us understand the basics.
Sure. So a, a, people talk about avoiding probate at their deaths, and that's definitely something that you need to consider planning for. Having a will not avoid probate. Having a will essentially ensure that probate will happen, because probate means proving the validity of the will. That's the meaning of the word. If probate is something that you want to avoid at your death, then you definitely need to have a trust put into place before you die. And there are actually two types of probate that you're looking to avoid. One is obviously at your death. Another is during your lifetime. If something happens to you where you're incapacitated and can't manage your finances on your own, if you don't have a trust set up, then there's a possibility that your family is going to have to go and have a guardian appointed for you. And at least in Illinois, that happens through the probate court. So you will have a court controlling what your guardian does with your funds. Even if you're married, that's something that can happen to you if you get into a situation where you're unable to make decisions for yourself. Even if you do have a trust, though, you still want to have a will. So essentially, what a trust is a basic contract between yourself and a trustee. While you're living, you are the trustee of your own trust. So you're still controlling everything that you own as if there is no trust in existence. It's either when you become incapacitated or when you pass away that a third party, whether it's your spouse or someone else that you appoint to take over, steps into your shoes and manages your property for you outside of the court system. That's the main advantage for most people in having a trust, is to be able to continue to manage your finances outside of the supervision of the court system. For most people, the tax advantages of trusts don't really come into play because of the large limits that they now have on federal estate tax and state, for the most part, for most states, the estate taxes. It's more of a situation where you're trying to avoid the costs and the hassles of having the court control what happens to your property, either after you pass away or you become incapacitated. It gives you a level of control. You get to determine who the trustee is. You get to determine where your property goes outside of the statutory framework of what the state of Illinois or whatever state you're from dictates happens to your property after you pass away. You can make gifts to charities. You can provide for educational expenses for your children and your grandchildren. You can provide for medical expenses for your children and your grandchildren. And all of that is something that you would not be able to do if you died without a trust and you just had a will. And I know that was a lot to drop on you in one basically long paragraph. So if there are any questions, I can take a pause now and you can shoot some questions at me.
I'll get started, Edward. So I don't know, before, just so you guys know, I had Edward do this for me and Kathy and actually for my dad. And it was as a result of watching Susie Orman on PBS. And she's like, everybody needs to have a living revocable trust. And Susie is somebody whom I trust and think of her as somebody giving good advice. So I asked Edward to help, and my mom passed away about 15 months ago, and we went through the probate process. So I asked Edward why it was in my best interest to do this, and he basically said the same thing to me as he did to you guys just now. But Edward, what do you say to people when they say, well, this isn't something I need to worry about right now? This is when I become a, because most of the people on this call are in their 40s, give or take. And is it important to do this now versus when you're 80?
I think it's more important to do this now because you have a lot more moving pieces going on now in your 40s, especially if you have kids. This is something that if you're 40 and you don't have a trust and you have assets that need to be managed, and you're going to have to go through a guardianship, that guardian is going to be controlling your financial life until you're 80. So you're talking about 40 years of court supervision of what happens to your assets and to your family's assets, as opposed to a trust where you're able to name, whether it's your spouse or a financial institution, to basically step in and keep everything going as it had been. So you're avoiding a lot of costs, especially at a young age. If something were to happen to you where you didn't pass away but you were incapacitated, you're avoiding a lot of costs and hassle for your family to be able to have the trustee continue to manage your property instead of having to go through the court system. And, things happen. Life is uncertain. There's no guarantee that just because you're 45 or 47 or 50 that something happens to you and you're gone tomorrow. You can avoid that probate process for a transition from when you were here to after your death. Make it a lot easier for your family not to have to go through the court system and wait the approximately 18 months that it takes to probate an estate. It can happen much quicker. The transition is, for the most part, much smoother, and you're just basically avoiding that oversight of the court both during your lifetime and after your death.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions? I have a few more, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. Go ahead. Did somebody want to ask something?
Carolyn was just saying she thinks we're good.
Okay.
She said.
How hard is it to get one of these set up?
It's not very difficult. It involves meeting with an attorney and going over what you own and how it's held, putting together a plan as to what you want done with your property after you die, determining who you want to name as a trustee, either when you're incapacitated or after you die, and putting the documents together. So, it's a process that will involve at least one initial meeting with the attorney, preparation of drafts for you to review, and then proper execution of those documents so that they're put into place and effective. So, from 4 to 6 weeks to put it together.
And then what's sort of the price tag of it?
It depends on the complexity of your financial house and also the complexity of the plan that you want to put together. For someone who has a home and retirement plans and basic assets, I would usually charge about $3,500 to put the whole plan together. And that's not an insignificant amount of money, but you are avoiding the back end costs and putting it together up front is essentially the savings that you get out of putting this together. So you could always, and I'm not advocating this, you can go on LegalZoom and try to put together a document using one of those services. Obviously, you're not getting the advice of an attorney when you're doing that. You're not tailoring a plan specifically to you based on the advice and expertise of an attorney when you're going and doing it yourself. You're not guaranteeing that whatever document you put together at the end of the day is going to be effective. So I think it's well worth the investment of the money and the time to seek a professional's advice, have the professional craft the document for you, and then make sure it's properly executed and put into place.
Good question, Nate, because I was going to ask the same thing. Jennifer, did you jump on? I thought you may have, but maybe not.
Yeah.
Okay. So you didn't hear the beginning. Edward's a friend of mine. He just set up a living trust and will. And really my goal in having Edward on is just to kind of give you guys, if you haven't thought about it, it's, I am by no means trying to advise you to do anything. I just want you to be aware of, because, here we are spending a lot of time in preparation of a financial house. And if God forbid something really bad happens, you can leave your family members in kind of a state of chaos. That happened when my stepfather passed away. He was ill prepared, and to say it was difficult is an understatement. So I just asked Edward to be able to explain it a lot better than I could have, and I think he did that. And like I said, I'm not, telling anybody on the call to do anything. I just want you to be aware that this is something that I have done, that Kathy and I have done. And it's weird. One of the reasons, and this is kind of a selfish, funny reason, but my dad's 76 years old. And I'm not, as most people, I'm not super comfortable asking him about, what his situation is, like his wills and things like that. And, what happens if he gets sick, all that stuff. And it was easier for me to say, Dad, do you have a living revocable trust? Because Kathy and I are going through it right now. And for some reason that made it easier for me to talk about what happens after he dies, because I'm talking about it in present time as a 43-year-old man, that I am getting this house in order as a 43-year-old man. So it just made it a little bit easier for me to ask him. So I don't know, obviously, what the family situation for you guys is, but if it is an uncomfortable thing to do, an easy way for me to bring it up was to say, well, listen, this is what we're doing right now. And Edward was nice enough to set it up for my dad as well. So I just wanted, that was just kind of a random way I went about it as far as bringing up, not the easiest, because his health isn't perfect, and it's just a weird conversation to have. So it made it that much easier. So does anybody else have anything before we let Edward go?
Ed, this is Kevin. I have a question for you.
Sure.
We had our financial advisor, or actually it was an attorney friend of ours, set up like 15 years ago an irrevocable insurance trust.
Sure.
We've since a revocable trust, but do I still need that irrevocable? And maybe there's no reason to get rid of it because it doesn't cost me anything, I guess. But does it ever have both?
Well, the life insurance trust, that's more of an estate tax avoidance tool where you're able to shift the ownership of any life insurance that you have to this irrevocable trust. It's good if you have a very large life insurance policy, and in today's estate tax environment, that would be anything that was in the neighborhood of $6 to $10 million. That could pass completely tax-free upon your death, because you would technically not be deemed to be the owner of any of those life insurance proceeds. It's not something that you necessarily have to get rid of, especially if you want to keep that coverage that you have in those policies that are owned by the trust. But today, the federal estate tax exemption is $5.43 million, and spouses basically get to double up on that. You're talking about over $10 million that could pass tax-free between the two spouses. So unless you have life insurance policies that are over that amount, it's something that you need to make sure that it is properly, the premium is properly paid every year, so that you're not deemed to have any incident of ownership during your lifetime, so that when you pass away, it doesn't get included in your estate. There's no reason for you to get rid of it, but I at this point, because the exemption is so high, I would not recommend anyone do it unless they have a large life insurance policy that they want to try to keep out of their estate.
And did the limits used to be low? They used to be lower, right?
They used to be much lower. They used to be as low as $675,000.
Okay.
But it's gone up exponentially since that time.
Are we talking about the death tax? Is that what you guys are talking about?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, Jennifer, Nate, anything else before we get into business?
No, I think I'm good.
No, thank you. Thank you for explaining all that. That was an item on the to-do list, so thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Edward. Thank you, buddy.
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Edward.
you. Everyone have a nice Thanksgiving.
You too, man.
You as well.
All right. So let's. Thanks for. I just think that that's a really important part of our financial house. Kathy and I did one on like Quicken. It was Quicken software stuff. We did it like when our first daughter was born, and we haven't looked at it since. And then we just decided to jump in, and Edward was nice enough to help us set that up. So if you haven't had that, especially after my mom just passed away, I definitely think you should do something. And then the other resource I wanted to mention is that there's a website, and it's literally called getyourshittogether.org. And this came from Tony's book. And it's from a woman whose husband died all of a sudden, and it just kind of left her feeling very helpless and all that. So I think it's kind of like a LegalZoom type thing, but that's another resource for you. And that'll be in the PowerPoint that I have here, but it's called getyourshittogether.org. And then there's another site that'll be in the notes, legalzoom.com/livingtrusts overview. So it kind of walks you through that because, Edward costs a few $1,000, and if you really want to, get into it and try your best to figure it out yourself, I always get nervous that I'm going to screw it up. So I'd rather pay the extra money and just know it gets done right. But there's a lot of very resourceful people out there that will figure this out themselves. And if you're one of them, save yourself a bunch of money and do it yourself on LegalZoom. So, okay. Section 4 review, know your portfolio makeup. I just wanted to make sure, does everybody have some type of Ameritrade or Schwab account, even if you don't have any money in it? Does everybody have like a brokerage account that they use? We'll start with Kevin. You guys have one. Nate, do you have one?
I don't. I mean, it's different than the 401k.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, and it's just like if and the reason I bring it up is like, let's say whatever, you got a Christmas bonus and you have $500 and you want to invest it.
Right.
These accounts, like I have mine through Ameritrade. Kevin, what's yours through? Do you know?
Yeah, ours is Bernstein.
Okay. Another one is called Schwab, which is really good. Jennifer, do you have a brokerage account?
I have a E-Trade. I use
Okay.
E-Trade.
Yeah, I think E-Trade does the same thing, and it's really just in case you come in, you show up with some cash and you want to like put some money in an IRA, that you have a vehicle to do it. And it doesn't. I don't think it costs anything to establish an account. Maybe you have to put like whatever $50 in there just to get started. But I would encourage everybody to at least have that available, so it's easier that if you do in fact want to put $100 or $1,000 into an IRA or Roth IRA in this year or next year or whenever, that it's already set up. So it's like one less barrier to do it. So that's the one thing. And then I wanted to go over the portfolio makeup. So does everybody have at least a pretty good idea of how their portfolio is balanced between stocks and bonds and cash and things like that? Whether it's in your 401k or your IRA or some type of retirement vehicle. Does everybody have that? I'll start with you, Jennifer. Do you know what your balance is between the different types of asset classes?
Not really. I went through the workout card and I put in, the 401k and then a couple different IRAs. I realized how terrible they are as far as how they're divided up. So that's the next step, is figuring out what to put, how to divide them up.
Got it.
Right now they're like target date funds, and full of mutual funds and all that.
Oh, so it could be one of those high cost mutual fund things?
I think so. So that's the next step, is determining what and where to put it all.
Well, and it's funny because with Ameritrade, and I don't know, does this money have to stay, is this in your employer's 401k account?
One of them is, and that's Vanguard, but then there's an IRA at Fidelity, and then another IRA at Edward Jones. So
you have kind of money scattered all over the place.
Yeah, and I don't like that.
No, and I don't know. I don't think there's any penalty from moving it from one place to another. I'm a big fan of simplicity, and I would invite you to think maybe over the holidays to get them all in one place. That doesn't mean they're all in the same asset class, but if you can maybe pool these different accounts together into one brokerage account, it might make your life a little bit less stressful and less confusing.
Yeah, I agree.
And Nate, do you have an idea, because you have a 401k, right?
And an IRA, yeah. So I guess I do have a brokerage account. And yes, I have an understanding of where it is and where my money is.
Got it. And Kevin and Carolyn, you guys know your balance of assets? You guys there, Kevin, Carolyn?
Sorry, we're on mute. Yes.
That's all right. So yeah, because I think that the best way to figure out whether or not we are really knowledgeable about where our money is can we say that 33% of our money is in stocks and 50% is in bonds, and whatever the balance is, 17% is in cash. Like, if we can answer that question, we will be ahead of 99.9% of the population. And I have a pretty good understanding. It's a little diluted because I own an apartment building too, so it's kind of hard to see how all your assets are balanced out between these different vehicles. But that's really the main thing, because as we're going to talk a little bit about diversification on this call, and it's important the only way you can make any changes in your portfolio is to have an understanding of where your portfolio is today. And if so step one is to know it. Step two is to realize, oh, well, maybe it's supposed to be this or that, and then you can make some changes. So that was the first thing regarding a summary of our last call. The risk quiz, which is a website that's on the report card, you just click on it. It gives you an idea of what your tolerance for risk is. That way you kind of fall in, that way like if you're a high risk person, that more of your portfolio should be in stocks and US equities, and vice versa. If you don't like any risk at all, maybe you put more of it in bonds. But the danger is if you put more of it in some lower risk assets, you have the potential to not have an appreciation of your portfolio as you would with higher risk things. So we're going to talk about that. And then the last two things on the report card from last session was credit freeze or monitoring. I still have an intention to do Credit Karma. I have not yet done it, and I just wonder, we talked a little bit about this on the last call. Did anybody make any changes in how their credit is perceived by the public?
Yeah, no, we looked into it because we had that LifeLock.
Yeah, LifeLock.
And it was, and I told you last time, the $495 whatever, that actually covered both of us. So it was, $250 each. So
it was less expensive than you thought. Got it.
Right.
But
still, I think more expensive than other things. The one thing though that I started looking at it right after we got off the call is if you you do a credit freeze.
Yeah.
All that does is stop somebody from opening new credit under your name.
Correct.
But it doesn't stop anybody from taking your existing accounts and stealing those numbers and then charging a bunch of stuff and doing that.
Got it. And does LifeLock help
That's
you
what,
avoid that?
yes.
The only thing I will say to that point, and I'm not an expert, but I know like if somebody takes your credit card and runs up a bunch of, buys a car with it or something, that as long as it doesn't come from you, as long as you didn't buy that card, then they will give you a credit in full for that. But I also know that if it's a business credit card, there's less protection. So you have to be careful. And like I said, I'm not an expert on it, but I think your point is a good one, Kevin, in that Credit Karma freezes it and doesn't let anybody, I guess, steal your identity, whereas LifeLock does some things to prevent anybody from making your life even more impossible. So
I
go
I
ahead, Nate.
also think that yes,
Right.
your credit cards will be refunded, but I don't think your debit card will. So if
Ah,
you have a debit card, that you're SOL.
All right.
Thank you for adding that. And Kevin, you might not know the answer to this, but do they? I don't know how LifeLock works. Like, how does it? Like, let's say somebody broke into your house and stole your debit card, and then somehow managed to get your PIN. Does LifeLock like? How do they know? Like, is it like insurance in case it happens to you, or do you know?
That's a great question. I mean, I think the answer is yes. There's insurance, basically, and you can just call them
Hmm.
and they change all your, they'll contact all your financial institutions and basically stop all that and change everything. But short of that, I don't know, like to Nate's point, if, they monitor our checking accounts and that kind of stuff, but I don't know if somebody stole it. I don't know how that works. I mean, I don't know if it's cheated or not. I know there's a million guarantee for something, but I don't know what it is.
So it sounds like LifeLock is kind of like a brokerage place where they have all your information in a secure place, and if God forbid
Mhm.
something were to happen, you make one phone call versus if it were to happen to me, I would have to like figure out where all my accounts were, all my previous credit cards, and then start making calls to all these different institutions. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then last but not least, term insurance or whole life. We talked a little bit about that last time. I definitely encourage us all to have term life insurance, assuming that we have dependents, and I think we all have kids, so that's something that we should definitely. And then the whole life was more just an example of what you don't want to do. From my perspective, is it's a really costly, fee-driven way of saving money. So if you have whole life, that's something that I discourage as a result of reading all these different things that I read. So that's section 4. Section 5, upside without the downside, create a lifetime income plan. I'm going to switch over to, we talked about the brokerage accounts. Can you guys, is everybody on the computer? Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So those are just a few different accounts, Ameritrade.com, Schwab.com. All right, so in one of these chapters, 5.1, Tony talks about the all seasons portfolio. So the best way I want to explain this idea for those of you guys who read it or remember it is they talk a lot about when misfortune happens in the marketplace. And it's not a matter of if the stock market will crash, it is a matter of when. The whole idea of the marketplace is it has ups and downs. Some of them are significant and drastic ups, and some of them are significant and drastic downs. Like hopefully it's like you have much more smooth sailing, but they know enough about the marketplace to know that there are times when it hits the fan, like in 2007, 2008 when there was a banking crisis, or 2000 when the internet bubble popped, or 1970s when, I don't know, something happened to Jimmy Carter was president and like interest rates were like 18% and it was crazy. So I guess the idea is that there's always stuff that's going to happen, and the idea is to be prepared for it. I did struggle with this content a little bit in that, for the first 350 pages of this book, Tony's kind of telling you to know what your risk tolerance is, and then to have a special concoction of stocks and bonds and things like that. But then you get to section 5.1 and he talks about an all seasons portfolio. And so the one thing from the book is that it's not an exact science. So this is kind of a brief summary of this guy named Ray Dalio, who is one of the geniuses in the financial marketplace. And this is basically what his all seasons portfolio is. So if you look at the bullet points with me here, and the idea of this portfolio is that regardless of whether or not the market is up a little bit, down a little bit, or just had a huge uptick, or if it crashed, you're safe. So in other words, this is for the investor who doesn't want to have to worry. And I'm going to explain a few examples of why this might be a good idea. But to just for clarification, so Ray Dalio's all seasons portfolio is 40% in U.S. bonds, which is a lot, 30% in stocks, 15% in intermediate U.S. bonds, 7.5% in gold, 7.5% in commodities. And then he says that you should rebalance it annually. So I show this just because this is something and they went all the way back to the 1900 to see how this portfolio would have done through the ups and downs of the marketplace. And the bottom line is it actually did better than just having all your money 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds. It actually is this magic formula that Tony talks up really quite a bit in his book. So it is an idea for us all. Now, me personally, I am not going to do the all seasons portfolio. I am willing to incur more of the risk with the hopes that it appreciates even more up. But as I get older into my 50s and 60s and 70s, you could be assured that I'm probably going to have a portfolio that looks more like what we see here versus what it is right now, because I'm most heavily invested in U.S. stocks and S&P 500 index funds. So
Todd, can I add something?
Sure.
So I took this and I spoke with my guy about it and just was like, hey, what do you think of this? This is something, I got from, Ray Dalio, blah, 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 and he knew who he was and everything. He's like, well, this is extremely conservative. And so in listening to this again, this section over the past week or so, there was something hidden in there where he actually says that this all seasons portfolio should almost be treated like your security bucket. So when previously they were talking about your risk bucket and your security bucket, and if you just leave this as your security bucket, I think you'll be in good shape. So say you put 40% in this allocation and then another 60% for for younger folks at in mutual fund, or not mutual funds, but low fee index funds, and just sort of peg it to the overall market, then you have that 40% that's just going to appreciate little by little, but be relatively safe in all seasons, and then you've got the rest that is taking care of the upside of the market and looking at the long-term growth effects.
Got it. And that's actually really good advice. So yeah, as Tony taught early on, there's different buckets. I forget what they're called, but one's the security bucket, which will be, I don't remember what the percentage of the buckets are, but say it's a third of your money. So I think what Nate is recommending through his guy and just through re-listening to this chapter is you can use this all seasons portfolio 100% in your security bucket. So, and it's not like you have to do these individually. You could very easily find a fund that has this type of exposure to risk if you want. I will say, because I asked one of my friends who knows a lot more about money than I do, I said, can you, because it says 40% in long-term U.S. bonds, which basically means that we're giving the government money and they are going to pay us back in 20 or 25 years. You can buy these directly from the website. There's a website let me see if I can find it. I can't pull it up right now, but it'll be in the minutes that I send out to you guys. If you want, if you like the idea of having treasury notes, you can either buy it through your Ameritrade account, or you can buy it directly from the government through this website. And it's like whatever, bonds.gov.us or something like that. So that is available to us if we want it. But the next thing I wanted to go to in regards to this is that the idea of storm-proof returns and unrivaled results. I thought this was fascinating when I read this book originally. So let's say I had $1,000 in an account, and the account lost 5% in it. Well, in order to get that, so it goes from 1,000 down to down 5%. So now it's $950. And then in order to make that back, I would only need it to grow by 5%. But if you use a bigger measure, so let's say instead of my stock, let's say I bought AT&T at whatever $1,000, and it went down 5%, I would just have to hopefully let it grow 5%, and I would be back to even. But let's say AT&T did horribly, and they went down 50%. So it went from 1,000 down to 500. In order to make that money back, I would have thought that it takes a 50% appreciation, just like it took a 50% decline in it. But actually, it would require you to make 100% return on your money. And I thought that was really fascinating. Whenever I think of returns, I think that, oh, well, you lose 5%, you gain 5% back, and you're back to even. That's true with the smaller numbers, but when you get into the bigger percentage, and this would happen like in a stock market crash. So let's say you have $10,000 in your portfolio and the market crashes and it goes down to 5,000. In order to get back up to that 10,000, you don't need a 50% gain, you actually need a 100% gain, which was really interesting to me. So really the point of this story is that it takes a lot more gain to get back to even if you start out with losses. And I will give you one more example in just a second of how that can affect you. Not so much now because everybody on this call is relatively young, but as we get closer to our retirement years, that's an important idea to know. The other thing I will say, and this will be in the minutes as well, is there's a 30-minute video, a YouTube video that Ray Dalio put together called it's at economicprinciples.org. And if you are interested in how the economy works, the economy is very complex and very not easy to understand. And he does it in a 30-minute video. This would be like, to my wife, if I had her watch this, it would be nails on a chalkboard. But for me, it's something that I found fascinating. So if you're up for finding out the way the economy works and to become empowered as a financial investor and know what you're talking about, this is a pretty cool thing to have at your disposal. So the next thing is John bit the dog bit John. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in the book, he gave a real life example of the timing of when something happens. So I don't think you're going to be able to, maybe you can read this. Can you guys read this pretty well? Let's look at John first. So John has $500,000 when he's 64 years old. Do you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay. So what John's plan is so at 64 years old, he decides at 65 he's going to withdraw about $25,000 a year. So the middle column is what he pulls out of his retirement account from when he's 65, right there, all the way down to when he's 83. And then this right column talks about what his nest egg is at the end of that year. And then this left column right here talks about how his portfolio did in those first few years. So what's interesting is as you look at this, so for the first few years, he took some significant hits in his portfolio. So the first year, his portfolio went down 10%. The next year, it went down 13%. The next year, it went down 23%. And then he started making a little bit of money. It went up 14, 2%, 12%. But what happens is because he endured these significant losses in the first few years, it took that much more effort to get any of his money back. So by the time he turned 83, he was out of money, okay? Even though this left column, the average rate of return is 8% return. So what that means is, even though it was 8%, he still only was able to withdraw $580,000 out of his retirement account. So this will make more sense when you hear the next example. So now we have Susan, and it's the exact same setup. The only difference is that he flip-flops the years. So instead of it starting out poorly, it actually starts out well. So for year one, instead of him, John lost 10%, Susan's actually going to make 12%. In year two, she gets 23% increase in her nest egg. And then year three is 26%. So all these returns are identical between Susan and John. The only difference is which one happened first. So in John's, the losses came first, whereas in Susan's, if you see here, Susan's losses came at when she was 87, 88, and 89 years old. So there's a significant drop of 23%, 13%, and 10%. But if you look at how much more money Susan ended up with, she ended up with $911,000 when she's 89, she ended up with $1.6 million when she's 89 years old, whereas John was out of money by the time he was 83 years old. So Susan, at 89 years old, still had $1.6 million left, and John was out of money when he was 83. The reason this is an important example, and it's more important not for us now, but when we get closer to retirement age, is if you decide, let's see, I'm 43 right now, so let's say I retire when I'm 65. That's 22 years from now. So it's 2015, 22 years. It's going to be 2037 when let's say I'm 65 years old and I'm going to retire. And if I suffered these losses early on, I'm much more likely to lose my money. So that brings us to the next thing. And I'm not going to push anything on anybody, but I think it's important that you at least know that this is a possibility. So Tony talks a lot about annuities, and I've always been taught that annuities are expensive and they're a pain and they're not very good. But I just wanted to give you guys just some overall definitions of annuities. But before I do that, I've been talking for about 10 minutes. Does anybody have any questions or comments on anything that I just said? Okay, so here's annuities. There's different types. So what is an annuity? Annuity is basically me giving an insurance company money with the promise that they're going to pay me back. And there's all these different types of annuities, but it's basically just us giving. You're not investing in stocks or bonds or anything. You're basically giving money to an insurance company, and it's like income insurance. So there's immediate annuities, which basically means if I give an insurance company money right now, they'll start giving me monthly payments. There's a deferred annuity, which basically means I can give an insurance company money now and say I'm not going to start taking my payments until I turn 65. And then there's two different types of annuities in the deferred class. One is called fixed, which means you get a guaranteed rate of return. So I give an insurance company $10,000. They'll say, well, we'll pay you 3% for the next 20 years. An indexed annuity is basically the return is tied to the stock market. So you basically get some of the upside of being in the stock market without the downside risk. And then lastly, there's something called a hybrid indexed annuity, which is the same thing as an indexed annuity, but it also has a lifetime income rider. So basically, you can tell an insurance company, I'm going to give you whatever, $10,000 this year, and I'm going to start pulling my money out when I'm 65 years old. But I also want you to pay me a certain amount regardless of how long I live, whether or not I die when I'm 80 or 90 or 100. And you can get that right now from an insurance company. It will cost more money because their risk goes up, but you can do it. So it is a way to make sure that you do not outlive your nest egg. and there's some costs associated with it, but it's also the knowing that you're not going to endure the ups and downs of the market when we're in our retirement years. A few quick notes on it is that if I were to do this, and I'm not planning on doing it anytime soon, but I can certainly see this being part of my portfolio as I get closer to retirement, is you want to pick a highly rated company, because if that insurance company goes out of business, you lose all your money. Now, that's a very scary thing, but one part in the book is that in 2009, when all the banks started going bankrupt, there was 140 banks that went bankrupt in 2009. And in that same year, not a single major insurance company did. The reason I say that is it's very unlikely, extremely unlikely, that an insurance company will ever go bankrupt, at least the big ones. If you get somebody that's not so big, then there's a little more risk attached to it. But that's something, it happens much less frequently than even when banks go out of business, which doesn't happen very often. It needed something catastrophic like 2009, when everybody thought the world was going to end financially, for that to happen. And even with that catastrophic event, no insurance companies went belly up, at least none of the higher rated ones. Few other notes is that variable annuities are not such a good idea, according to Tony. And then lastly, the one that Tony pushes the most is called fixed indexed annuity. And he gives a website of, where is it? I don't have the website in front of me, but I'll send it out. But the idea behind the fixed indexed annuities is it's significantly higher returns than CDs. You're guaranteed not to lose money of your principal. It's tax deferred, and you can do an optional income rider. And then one example I want to give is I did this on the website in the book. They give a website, so I just did a few different scenarios. So if I were to give the insurance company $50,000 right now as a 43-year-old man, and I said I'm going to retire at 65. So when I'm 65 years old, I'm going to get a certain income starting with that year. They would pay me $7,262 until I die. So if I only live 1 year, I only get $7,262 back. But if I live until I'm 110, then I get that for the rest of my life. I did the same example, but instead of retiring at 65, I actually waited until 75, and the annual income that I would get back from the insurance company would go up from $7,200 up to almost $15,000. So it gives you an idea of, basically, in an annuity, the longer you wait, the more it goes up. It's kind of like when you take your pensions out and things like that. So I know this is kind of like, go ahead, Kevin.
You ran through that example. Can you peg that to both yourself and your spouse? Like if you were to give them, say, you give them $50,000, and then you and your spouse start taking that money out when one of you hits, 70 or whatever.
Right.
What if one of you doesn't make it to 70? Can you peg that to both of you, or?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to it. I'm guessing it might roll into the idea of the whole idea of the living revocable trust. Is like if you have certain money coming back, it will go, the trust owns it, and then it goes to whoever receives that money upon your death. But okay. I think it's as simple as, because on this website, and I'll put it in the minutes, it's the one that Tony backs, and I do trust Tony. I'm sure that he probably has some certain financial gain as a result, but from what I know of him, he's not a shyster trying to, pull a fast one on you. I think that the companies that he chooses to partner with are reputable. But on this website that I did this example on, it did give you, basically a phone number to call, and you can ask that question to Nate. But my guess is that if Kathy and I were going to do one, I would do one for me, and I would make sure that she does one for her. I don't know if you can peg two different people on it. It's kind of like if my father-in-law is a teacher, and when he dies, his pension goes away. So I don't think his pension moves over to his wife. I think it's just a matter of once you're gone, you're gone. But I could be wrong. And I know that this information is pretty dry, and like, oh, why are we talking about this? I don't have to worry about retirement. If nothing else, I simply want to plant this asset class as a seed into what it is that we have available to us. A few of the frequently asked questions, and this is from the book, if you die early, the account balance is left to the heirs. So that falls into place with what your question was, Nate. If you withdraw money in an emergency, can you withdraw money in an emergency? The answer is yes, but there's a withdrawal penalty, usually about 10 or 15%. And you will get a hit from the feds, kind of like if you take money out of your 401k early, they automatically hit you with a 10% penalty. So it's not something you want to withdraw unless you absolutely have to. As far as fees, there's no annual management fees. The guaranteed lifetime income rider usually is between 0.75 and 1.25%. You can use the money from your IRA in an annuity, which I did not know. So it's not like you have to have cash outside of your retirement accounts. You could actually use the money inside your retirement accounts to be used in an annuity. And your income in the annuity is based on the amount, based on how much you put in, the length of time before you touch the money, and how old you are when your income begins. And then lastly, the taxes are at ordinary income taxes, and basically it's just the insurance from another crash. So like I said, really dry information, but I think that there is purpose to knowing that this is available out there. I don't know what's going to happen next year, much less 20 years down the road, but I do see this being part of my portfolio in the long run as I get, closer to retirement. So does anybody have any questions about annuities? Let's see if I can.
Nope.
Anybody have any questions about anything, whether it's about this session or about any other thing that you guys might want to talk about?
Has anyone done that freezing of their credit reports?
I have not done it, Carolyn. I'm planning to do it as soon as I get some free time and I put it high on my priority list. I do know you have to go to all 3 different credit agencies, and it's cheap. It's like $9 a year. I think it's just $9 to do it, and then there's no annual fee after that. But it's TransUnion, Equifax, and whoever the third one is. Anybody remember the third one?
Aquarian or
Experian.
Experian. There you go. So I am planning to do the credit freeze just for kicks, and because I don't really get loans that much. It's usually like a pretty big thing whenever I try to get a loan out. So the next section is an interesting one. I don't know exactly how our conversation is going to play out because it's a bunch of interviews from some famous people. Chapter 6.0, Meet the Masters. And he interviews people that nobody has access to. And there's also some video of some of these interviews, and I could put that in the minutes as well. So if nothing else, I'd love for you guys to kind of familiarize yourself with some or all the interviews, just because people are the best in the world, and it's all in the book, so we can check that out and learn from the masters, basically. So that's it. That's section 5, and section 6 is coming up. So we have 2 more sessions left. I would like to get a date on the calendar. I think the next one I had is not going to be good for me. So I'm hoping that we could set a different date. Originally it was scheduled for December 8th, but I have another presentation and I'm going to be doing that night. Does anybody have a problem with Monday, December 7th? Jennifer, are you there?
Yeah, that would be fine, I think.
Nate?
I'm checking my calendar here. Should be okay. Yeah, I think so.
Kevin and Carolyn?
I will just be a few minutes late bringing home a child, but that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. I'll check with Laura too. Hopefully Monday she's okay with it. But I'll communicate with you guys via email. So we did get it in under an hour. I'll send out minutes like I always do with kind of review points and update our workout card and see how we're doing with that. So anything else? Anybody else have anything before we sign off?
No, that was great.
Well, like I said, a little dry. Annuities, I mean, just that word sounds boring, but it's important that we all know it. And I'm excited for the next section because it was my favorite. It was the one that I read the fastest, just because I think that these people are fascinating. So, and the chapter, each interviewee, Tony basically says if you could leave no money or assets to any of your heirs, what's the one bit of financial advice you would give to your grandchildren or whatever? And it's some pretty remarkable stuff. So that's it. 60 minutes in, and you guys enjoy your Monday night. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. I thank you very much for your attentiveness and listening and being a part of this wonderful group. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Adios.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Thanks.